Good afternoon. Welcome to the Midday Mull for Wednesday, the 9th of March. With Robert Murray McShane, we continue working our way through Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, today reading chapter 8, a chapter dedicated to looking at how the church gives, and it's headed Generosity Encouraged. And it's one of the great teachings of giving in the church. And in verse 11 we read, "Now finish the work, so that your eager willingness to do it may be matched by your completion of it according to your means. For if the willingness is there, the gift is acceptable, according to what one has, not according to what one does not have." And Paul is saying that giving needs to be willing. You need to be willing to do it. It's never grudging. And it's according to your means. If you have, you can give. If you haven't got, then you can't give. The church doesn't ask people to give what they don't have. And it's where the church so often falls down, trying to make people do things. And so often there's no willingness in it. And I was really struck by verse 2, where Paul, looking at the Macedonian churches and their response, and he says to the Corinthians, you need to look at what they've done and emulate them. He says, out of the most severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. And that struck me. It was out of an overflowing joy that their generosity flowed. And so often the church it concentrates on the need. And you ought to give because look how desperately the roof's about to fall in. We need money to keep the roof on, and those people are so poor, and those people need to be fed. You ought to give. And so often Christians, we look at the needs and try and coerce people into giving and say, oh, you've got so much and they've got so little. You ought to give. And so people feel compelled to give, and therefore it's quite a reticent giving, and so often giving grudgingly, which is not what God's looking for. And we get it wrong. We need to be looking at joy. And if we're not engendering joy in people, that there isn't a celebration that overflows into giving. And as you read through this passage in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, you're struck by, it's talking about the willingness of people, and they pleaded for the privilege of sharing in this. They wanted to give. It wasn't something they were asked to do. They wanted to. And for me, that was a real challenge. As a church, we need to concentrate on the joy that we have in the Lord and what God has given to us and His generosity toward us and all that we have and the amazing grace that we've experienced. And our response to that is joy and love and compassion. And we want to follow God. We want to become more like Jesus. And out of that, our giving will flow. And our giving will be godly. Our giving will be joyful. Our giving will be generous. Our giving will be willing. And so we need to start with looking at God and the joy that we have in Him, not at money. And so look to God and see what He's given you. Look how much you have. Look at the blessings we've received from God. And let His joy fill your heart and life. And the giving and the serving and the witnessing and the growing the kingdom will flow out of that. So be challenged, but also be encouraged and be blessed.